Well, good morning, Willowdale. Thanks for clicking on the video link and joining us here today. Whatever day that might be, just so you know, we're doing this just days before Christmas. And if you're new with us, hey, I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you clicked on the link. I'd encourage you to go and click our website, find out a little bit more about us. But thanks for taking in this video with us today. My name's Jim. I'm one of the associate pastors here at Willowdale Chapel and the pastor of our Celebrate Recovery community. Today, we're going to continue in our series of Campfire Christmas, stories and moments when Jesus shows up. When Christ came near, and whenever Jesus shows up, there's a twist, right? Something's going to happen, and also lives are going to be changed. And today we're looking at a story of redemption, a moment when Jesus was passing through Jericho, only to stop and stay for a while. It's one of my personal top 10 favorite Bible stories, and it's Jesus' interaction with a man named Zacchaeus. But first, would you share a short prayer with me? Father, we just want to invite you into this time. We want to hear from you. We want you to speak to us. We ask that you would come and visit us and not leave us the same, but would you change us in our time spent with you? Amen. And so this text is Luke 19, 1 through 10. And it reads, "He entered Jericho and was passing through. And behold, there was a man named Zacchaeus. He was a chief tax collector and was rich. And he was seeking to see who Jesus was, but on account of the crowd, he could not, because he was small in stature. So he ran on ahead and climbed up into a sycamore tree to see him, for he was about to pass that way. And when Jesus came to the place, he looked up and said to him, 'Zacchaeus, hurry and come down, for I must stay at your house today.' So he hurried and came down and received him joyfully. And when they saw it, they all grumbled, 'He has gone in to be the guest of a man who is a sinner.' And Zacchaeus stood and said to the Lord, 'Behold, Lord, the half of my goods I give to the poor. And if I have defrauded anyone of anything, I restore it fourfold.' And Jesus said to him, 'Today salvation has come to this house, since he also is a son of Abraham. For the Son of Man came to seek and to save the lost.'" And I love stories in Scripture like this. Stories that give you just enough to understand what's happening, but they leave space for us to step into the storylines ourselves, to imagine the tension and the emotions and what God might be up to. And so let's step into this story together today. Verse 1, it says, "He entered Jericho and was passing through." Now, I don't know what you think of when you think about Jericho, but Jericho wasn't your average town. In fact, it was a city. It was the kind of place that if it were today, would be high on the list of places, if not the top of the list, of where you would want to live. It was known as the city of palm trees. And that alone tells us something about the wealth and the fertility of the land. Palm trees meant shade, and it meant food and building materials, comfort and prosperity. And just, you know what, palm trees just speak of the climate and the weather, right? Jericho was also famous for their rose gardens. This fragrance filled the air throughout the city. In fact, the name Jericho, by meaning, is connected into this idea of being perfumed, of being fragrant. Jericho was a perfumed city. Walking into Jericho probably felt like walking into Bath and Body Works or Yankee Candle Store, right? Jericho wasn't wealthy by accident, however. It was an important city with important people because it sat on a major trade route into Judea. It was a gateway city for commerce and trade. If you remember Jesus' parable of the Good Samaritan, it took place on the trade route, on that road between Jericho and Jerusalem. On this day, Jesus is traveling into Jericho to take that very road up to Jerusalem for the Passover festival. And because of its location, Jericho became the greatest taxation center in Palestine. It's a place of all kinds of characters and dignitaries and businessmen and tax collectors and regular folk and probably a whole bunch of people you don't want dating your daughter, because Jericho meant opportunity. And so everybody was there. Plus, it's the last stop on the way up to Jerusalem. And that's Jericho. And that brings us to the second verse, where we're introduced to Zacchaeus, a tax collector, a chief tax collector. And he is rich. And that combination right there probably tells us much of what we need to know. I'm sure you've already deducted that Zacchaeus was wealthy because he was a tax collector. Rome enforced some very high taxes upon the Jewish population, but they didn't collect the taxes directly. Instead, they auctioned off regions. And Zacchaeus would have secured the rights to collect taxes in Jericho. And with those rights came the backing of the Roman army, right? The muscle to enforce payment. So picture this. Zacchaeus is an Israelite. He's collecting taxes from his own people on behalf of Rome, the very empire that's oppressing them, so that they can continue to oppress. And if that wasn't bad enough, tax collectors were notorious for padding on the bill, adding extra fees to line their own pockets, getting rich off of his fellow oppressed Israelites. See, Zacchaeus didn't just participate in this system, he rose to the top of it, a chief tax collector, meaning he had other tax collectors working underneath him. And oh yes, he skimmed money from them as well. This is our new friend Zacchaeus. He was wealthy, powerful, and deeply hated. He climbed to the top of his profession and the top of the city's most hated list. The people of his day would be horrified to know that 2,000 years later, that we're still talking about him, that we know his name. And then in verses 3 and 4, it tells us that Zacchaeus is now seeking to see who Jesus was. And the language here suggests that this wasn't some kind of passing curiosity, but this has been a growing desire that has been building for some time. And now it was customary in those days for residents to come out of their homes to meet travelers on their journey. And with the crowds that are coming on their way for the Passover festival, and with Jesus being one of those travelers, Zacchaeus has opportunity to see Jesus. Now, it doesn't tell us exactly why Zacchaeus wants to see Jesus, but we do know this. He was wealthy and empty, powerful and alone. He had chosen the life of an outcast. He chose wealth over belonging. And yet, he's determined to lay his eyes on Jesus, even at risk to his own dignity and his own safety. See, normally, Zacchaeus would be someone to be feared, but mixing it up on the streets would be different. It would be dangerous for someone like Zacchaeus. First, he was small in stature. He's hated by the people and surrounded by not just the townspeople, but all of the Israelites that are coming through town, heading to Passover. It would not have been very hard for someone to just kind of, accidentally just give him a bump, knock him to the ground, let the crowds do what the crowds would do. It's a risky move for a collaborator of Rome to be on the streets in the crowds. And hearing that Jesus is on his way, the crowds would have been out in force. Zacchaeus was a thief. He wasn't stupid. So instead of risking the crowd, he runs up ahead and he climbs up a tree. And Luke, he tells us that it was a sycamore fig tree. And that detail actually matters. See, this tree has low branches and big, thick leaves. It's perfectly designed for vertically challenged individuals to climb. And it's perfect for hiding in, right? It's like, why hide? Well, because Zacchaeus knows what he's done. He knew that what he was doing as a tax collector was wrong. He heard the names that people would yell at him. He felt the shame. He felt the judgment of all of it. And on top of that, no dignified adult male would climb a tree in that culture. That was something children did. And so for Zacchaeus, even the prospect of this was humiliating. Yet up he goes, right? Trying to hide from the crowd, and while hoping to catch a glimpse of Jesus walking by. And I can't help but wonder if another story is kind of echoing in his mind. Maybe the story of Levi, the tax collector, from back in Luke chapter 5. A fellow tax collector who 3 years prior walked away from his tax booth to follow Jesus. And you might know him by the name Matthew. Maybe Zacchaeus was wondering, could Jesus do for me what he has done for Matthew, for Levi? Free me from the love of money, free me from shame, free me from isolation and guilt? In fact, Levi, after meeting Jesus, threw a party for all his tax collecting friends so that they could meet Jesus too. And I kind of wonder, I wonder if Zacchaeus was at that party. Maybe this isn't the first time Zacchaeus and Jesus have been hanging out in the same space together. I mean, it's doubtful, but it's fun to ponder. But at the very least, he knows the story of Levi. Now, up until now, it's all been told from the perspective of Zacchaeus. But here, in verse 5, the camera angle changes. And Jesus is walking through town, and he walks right up to the tree that Zacchaeus is hiding in. And he says, "Zacchaeus, hurry and come down, for I must stay at your house." Can you imagine that moment? Zacchaeus, he has to be the luckiest or the best tree picker in the history of tree pickers to pick the very tree that Jesus was going to come and stop under. Or more likely, Jesus is a professional seeker, and you cannot out hide and seek Jesus. Zacchaeus thought he was the one seeking, but it turns out Jesus has been seeking Zacchaeus all along. Verse 10 tells us, "For the Son of Man came to seek and to save the lost." See, Zacchaeus' scheme, it's fulfilled, but not by Zacchaeus, but by Jesus himself. And what does Zacchaeus do? He hurries down and he receives Jesus joyfully. And everything about that scene, that moment is wrong, isn't it? In that culture, much like ours, you don't invite yourself to someone else's house. It's rude, it's undignified, Jesus don't care. But interestingly, if you think about it, someone of Jesus' status, Jesus could have invited himself anywhere, to the governor's house, to the chief priest's house, to the most powerful people in town. And yet, he chose to invite himself to Zacchaeus' house. Also, Jesus calls Zacchaeus by name. And see, in a world of titles and labels, Jesus doesn't call him tax collector, doesn't call him traitor, doesn't call him sinner. He calls him Zacchaeus. See, when the crowd is shouting judgment, Jesus speaks dignity. Jesus appeals to his humanity, not his titles or his failures, but he appeals to Zacchaeus himself. You know what else is wrong? Well, maybe not wrong, but unusual. Well, the crowd is shouting judgment, and Jesus is speaking dignity. Zacchaeus responds with joy, not fear, not shame, but joy. For a tax collector who is stealing from the Jewish community to meet a Jewish rabbi, this would not typically be a moment of joy, but this would typically be a moment of judgment. But Zacchaeus, having been seen, his humanity acknowledged, invited down into relationship, he hurries down and he receives Jesus and he rejoices. Meanwhile, the crowd is just losing its mind at this point. He has gone in to be the guest of a man who is a sinner. And once again, we find Jesus hanging out with the wrong people. The mood on the street does not match the mood in Zacchaeus' house. And here we see grace on display. And yet, as Jesus enters Zacchaeus' house, the hostility, the judgment, the scorn from the crowd shifts from Zacchaeus onto Jesus. And Jesus shows mercy, and he takes the scorn and the hatred that was once directed onto a tax collector onto himself. It's a larger view of Jesus taking on the sin and judgment rightfully earned by you, rightfully earned by me, upon himself, because he has chosen to extend grace to us, to pay the bills for our wrongs and shame, to redeem us. And we're not told what Zacchaeus and Jesus spoke about while sharing a meal at Zacchaeus' house. That would have been the customary thing to do. But we're told as a result of that time together that Zacchaeus, he is a new man, right? A new man, simply by spending time with Jesus. And he commits to making restitution and to doing it generously. Jesus didn't demand change before entering Zacchaeus' house. Change came because Jesus entered his home. Jesus residing with us, it invokes a transformation within us, within Zacchaeus. Zacchaeus doesn't care about giving away the money, right? It no longer holds him captive. He has found something of far greater value. Salvation has come to Zacchaeus and to his household. Where Jesus is, salvation can be found. And those that receive him, that reorder their lives accordingly as a result of experiencing his grace. And I've been pondering all week, why would Zacchaeus do it? Why would he put himself in such danger? Why would he humiliate himself by climbing a tree? So he can see Jesus? It doesn't make any sense. What story would there be that if he was hanging out with Mrs. Zacchaeus that night and telling her all about it, right? I climbed that tree. I got a really good look at him. I did. He was no further than 20 feet from me. There would be no story in that. But it was being seen by Jesus. It was being invited by Jesus that made all the difference. See, Jesus comes to seek and save the lost. The power is in being seen. The power particularly is being seen by Jesus. And maybe that's our first point for today. If you have this sense that Jesus is worth seeing, just like Zacchaeus did, if you're here today seeking to learn more about him because you're just not sure yet, you don't know what to make of him and you want to know more, I just want you to know this. That feeling you have is actually Jesus seeking after you. Spend time with him. Your title doesn't impress him and your shame doesn't scare him. He wants to spend time with you. And if you earnestly spend time with him, just like Zacchaeus, he will transform you from the inside out. Now, I'm not a fire and brimstone kind of guy. I never look to try to scare people into heaven. And yet, in this story, this was Jesus' last time that he would travel through Jericho. See, he was heading to Jerusalem where the cries from the crowd, they were going to change from he went in to spend time with sinners to he has gone out to die with criminals. There's going to be a time when there will be no time left to respond to Jesus' invitation. And again, that is not my attempt to scare you into heaven, but it's my desire to love you well and to speak honestly and truthfully. It's my belief that Zacchaeus climbed that tree not to see Jesus, because he already knew that Jesus was worth seeing. Otherwise, why else would he be there? It's my belief that Zacchaeus climbed that tree because he didn't know if Jesus desired to see him. Zacchaeus is wondering if he was a lost cause, too far gone. He was an outcast amongst outcasts. But Jesus came to seek and save the lost. In fact, the name Zacchaeus itself, it means righteous one. And after spending time with Jesus, Zacchaeus could actually begin to live into his name. So if you, like Zacchaeus, are wondering if he desires to see you, you are not too far gone for the professional seeker, Jesus. Now, if you are a follower of Jesus, maybe point 2 is for you. What is God transforming in you today? Where are you sitting with and spending time with God? See, his work of transformation is never done in us. But when we begin to feel like we have arrived, like we've suddenly achieved or accomplished something, we can very easily become the people in the crowd in protest. We need to always remember God's transforming grace in our lives, all that he's done in our lives, and all that he is still doing in our lives, because that will change our hearts and that will change the way we see others. See, it was the Pharisees, it was the religious elite and the devout that somehow felt that they had arrived, and they cried judgmental words like sinner, tax collector. Meanwhile, Jesus just simply called them lost. He came to seek the lost. Like, we likewise need to do the same. I mean, we've exchanged words. We don't necessarily cry sinner and tax collector. We've changed the words, but we have our words that we cry to exclude people that we don't like, or somehow we feel that they are unworthy. Like, I don't know. Maybe Zacchaeus was like just behind on some student loan payments, and he's like, man, I'm just going to jump in that tax booth for maybe a year or two, pay off some debt, and I'm going to leave that behind. And he got stuck there. Like we just look at him with disdain, but maybe he was just simply lost. We need to see people who are far from Jesus simply as lost. They're stuck in the wrong place at the wrong time. Grace is a scandal because it insists on including those that we wish to exclude. It was Jesus seeking Zacchaeus and his humanity. It was inviting him in that changed his life. Like, would we do likewise? See, there's a story of a man named William Thomas from South Wales. The famous preacher Martin Lloyd Jones served as a young preacher there. And William was nearly 70 years old, and he was a foul-mouthed drunk. He overheard some other men talking about this young preacher, and this young preacher saying, hey, there is hope for everyone. And so he became very curious. So on Sunday, he went to church, but he lost his nerve. He was hanging around outside, but he couldn't find himself into the church. He went back the second Sunday, and as he arrived there, the music was playing and people were singing, and he was late, and he didn't make his way into church the second week. On the third Sunday, William, once again, he's just lingering around outside. He's nervous. He's got anxiety about what he should do. And someone actually sees him and invites him. See, one of the other men just called out, hey, Bill, are you coming in? Come sit with me. See, he was seen and he was invited, and William's life changed that day as he responded to the gospel. See, come sit with me. Words that this man's eternity hung on. They seem to be part of Jesus' seeking and saving the lost. And finally, as we look forward to Christmas in just a few days, we read that Jesus went and stayed with Zacchaeus. Stayed, in the Greek, it means to lodge. See, we see it back at Jesus' birth story in Luke 2:7, when the guest room, when the lodging was denied to Jesus, but it is now found in the home of a sinful tax collector. To lodge. But in order to lodge, many of us need to learn to dislodge. At Celebrate Recovery, we say that recovery isn't quitting something, it's replacing something. You replace a bad habit with a good one. And for Zacchaeus, lodging with Jesus dislodged his love of money. And would you prepare your hearts and your minds as we celebrate Jesus' coming and birth, not to stay, not to lodge in a manger, but to stay and lodge with us in ways that will transform us, that will dislodge the idols of our hearts. This season, would you open the guest room of your heart that has been previously denied access to Jesus? And would you lodge with him? Have a Merry Christmas.
Thanks for checking out our online teaching. If you enjoyed this content and would like some more information about us, head over to our website at www.willowdalechapel.org or download our app. There you can stay up to date on any events, ministries, and other opportunities we have coming up at Willowdale Chapel.